Hi, as promised, I wanted to talk you through the Project 1 rhetorical analysis assignment and give you some things to think about as we head into class this coming week. So to get started, here I am in our English 1020 syllabus, and I want to go to the Unit 1 project description. And in Unit 1, we're looking at writing that matters and writing what matters and figuring out what particular authors find important, how they state their arguments, what they use, what strategies they use to develop those arguments and to be persuasive. And we're also going to identify what we think is important and effective in that writing. So, starting on page 9 of the syllabus is where I have all that Project 1 information. So you can look at some of the reading we'll do throughout the project and the blogs that we'll write and the conversations that you'll have, and I'll give you specific directions for those things. But right now I want to look at the Project 1 rhetorical analysis essay assignment itself. And my goal in talking through this with you is not to read it in its entirety with you. I hope that you do that as a separate part of your assignment, but I do want to highlight a few things. So as I mentioned in class a little bit on the first day, this first assignment is going to give us practice in 3 particular areas. One, we're going to start to get the language of rhetoric. We're going to start practicing using these terms. Rhetorical situation is a term that we already talked about this past week. We'll look at types of arguments and we'll look at persuasive appeals. And we'll start to talk about those things in others' texts so that you can begin then practicing employing them in your own writing throughout the semester. We're also going to use those concepts like types of argument, logos, pathos, and ethos to help you read and analyze writing. So any kind of text that you're reading, whether you're reading it to analyze it, like you'll be doing in this project, or you're reading it to figure out how you want to use it as a piece of evidence or to add to the conversation in a research project, you want to be able to identify how the author is piecing together their work. Finally, although as I mentioned in class the other day, we're going to be writing in many different genres across the semester, this first essay, the rhetorical analysis essay, is probably the most standard academic type essay that we'll be writing in this semester. And so as you'll see as you scroll through this essay assignment prompt, there's an outline in here, actually 2 outlines. One walks you through moves that you should be making, and then this structures or can help you structure your essay. So we want to give you as much support as possible in knowing how to craft that academic essay. Although the end goal of this project is writing an academic essay that shows your understanding of key rhetorical concepts as they apply to a particular article, we're also going to be working toward that by doing some similar practice to what you did with Hanlon's article on the first day of class. So for this, you're going to be annotating that text, doing a 2-column journal like you did in class the other day, and kind of mapping out those concepts of argument and rhetorical appeals so you can start to think about the pieces of the whole article in different ways. And then you're going to make moves like practicing introducing texts and making your own thesis, providing evidence for an analytical argument. Now, for this assignment, I have pre-selected 4 articles for you to pick from. Brogan's Microsoft's Words, Grammar, and Style Tools Will Make Your Writing Worse, Garber's Why the Emoji Movie Fails, Haidt and Lukianoff's Why It's a Bad Idea to Tell Students Words Are Violence, and Jackson's We Need to Talk About Digital Blackface and Reaction GIFs, or GIFs. I don't really care which way you say it. Let me talk a little bit about why I've picked these 4 articles for you to look at this semester. Preparing for this semester, I was thinking a lot about how we could start talking about rhetoric by also looking at articles that explicitly address rhetorical choices. That is, the authors of these texts aren't just using rhetoric to make their arguments, as all writers and speakers do, but they're talking and writing about the ways that people more generally or specific entities have employed rhetoric, or they're criticizing the use of particular rhetorical moves. And so, although some of the topics at first glance might seem not or to not fully have to do with each other, I think that the more that you read between them, you'll see that there are some connections. So, as you start looking through the article choices for this week and you look at Garber's text on Microsoft Words and Grammar Tools, or the text on the Emoji Movie, which I did not take my kids to see, but which you might have seen, or you look at Lukianoff and Haight's article on the idea of talking about language as violence. And those are two authors that Hanlon references in his article as well, or at this article from Teen Vogue. As you look at those, you might start to see some of these texts actually in conversation with each other. So I'm going to try to make a little diagram of this quickly, and we're going to kind of talk about that more in class and think about how to develop that idea. Okay, so until I get a wireless mouse for my laptop, I'm not going to be as efficient at this as I hope to be, but I'm just going to use a blank Microsoft Word document to jot a couple of notes for you. It might be helpful for you to think about the text that we're reading as talking to each other in a way. That is, the authors of these texts are each voices in a big conversation about rhetoric at a dinner party. Doesn't that sound pretty exciting? It sounds like the kinds of dinner parties that I end up going to. Sometimes the authors will develop tangential conversations, but a lot of the times you'll find that they're kind of speaking at the same larger idea. So one thing you might start to think about as you skim through the text this week and analyze them more closely in the coming weeks is who is talking to whom. Here, we'll use a little smart art graphic to do this. So okay, so let's say that generally all these texts have to do with the very broad topic of rhetorical strategies and rhetorical responsibilities. And some of the authors talk about those kinds of things explicitly and some more implicitly. So all of these people are sitting around this dinner table and talking about the topic. So we've got these authors that you can pick from for Project 1. We have Hanlon, who you've already read, and we'll talk about his article in class. And then we're going to have other texts that we're reading in class that you can't select for Project 1, but you might be able to use them as a reference, or you might even just think about them and how they work into this conversation. So for example, we're going to read a text by Powell. And King. We are also reading, it's not going to let me put any more. We're also reading, I'll just add them down here, the authors of our textbook. So we have Alexander and Losh. And we might come into contact with some other texts as well. One thing I want to show you in the Hanlon article, especially when you read it online, is that online texts often take you to other texts that you might want to move over to and read also, so that you're really getting into the depth of that conversation. So for example, early in his article, Hanlon references this Atlantic essay, The Coddling of the American Mind. Now these are the same authors that we're reading, or we can read for another Project 1 choice, but this is not the article that I've selected. However, if you wanted to look at this text to really understand the conversation, this one does have to do with this larger thing that we're talking about and rhetorical choices. So you might go and check that out. So when you're looking at these texts online, you might want to go in and check out some of the other texts that they're looking at too. So ultimately, what ends up happening is that more and more people end up branching off and being at this party. And we can work on developing that idea as we talk in the coming weeks. There's no expectation that you would talk about more than one author in Project 1. You can focus just on the one author of the text you're analyzing, or in this case, the pair of authors who wrote the article. So Garber or Haight and Lukianoff or Jackson or Brogan. But you might find that reading other texts deepens your understanding of the context in which these authors are writing. And as we move into projects 2 and 3, you might find that having a bigger understanding of the larger conversation is really useful for you, both for developing research inquiries and starting to place texts in conversation with each other in those projects. We'll talk more in class about how to continue reading for arguments, how to start practicing annotating for logos, pathos, ethos, and for the structure of an argument, and then for being able to analyze the effectiveness of that argument. That is, do the rhetorical strategies that the author has chosen help that author successfully convey the argument to their audience? See you soon.